What's up guys, welcome back to part 3 of the Sally costume making of series that I'm doing on my channel. Today we're going to focus on the bodice of the dress. I'm using a thrifted bodice piece as the basis of what I'm going to be working off of. I want the bodice to end around where my waist is, so I took note of how many inches that is. So the 35.5 inches is my waist, the 36.5 is just an inch to give for sewing, and then the 27 inches there is actually how wide the pre-existing bodice is. I definitely wanted to keep the sweetheart neckline because I thought it looked very romantic and adorable. I wasn't sure if I wanted to build up off of the pre-existing bodice that I had, but then decided to cut out the cups and everything and actually use it as a pattern. So as I cut, I'm trying to keep as close to those seam lines as possible while avoiding the wire that's in the cups and everything. Oh, and I have a sewing buddy apparently. So here is what the cup looks like. I'm removing the wire before I'm cutting the other seam line across the boob because you obviously don't want to be cutting or attempting to be cutting wire with your fabric scissors. The wire that's in this is not very nice, but it'll do, donkey, it'll do. So just take your time cutting around the seams, and then you have your pattern. So I'm taking some scrap broadcloth material and pinning down each piece. Here I'm just marking with a fabric marker how big the actual piece is, and then I'm going to add a little bit of material. Later down the road I kind of screw up a bit because I don't actually sew where I gave myself some extra room to sew. I sewed too far away, so the breast area on the dress ends up being very large on me. Then I do the same for the lower half of the cup. Cut all those pieces out, and then I start working on the lining for the underneath. So I do the same method. I make sure to add some material and obviously make it to fit me. So here I'm just measuring out 36.5 inches so that I have enough to sew with. Here I'm just deciding how much of a swoop I want it to go down, and you're going to want to have 2 layers of lining, especially in the midsection. We're going to be adding the boning into the ribs basically. So you're going to want 2 layers of fabric to sandwich that in. The breast cups you can kind of get away with it, but you know, it's always better to have more lining. So make sure that you fold your material first before cutting so that both your pieces are the same. And once I have the lining cut out and ready to go, I can cut the colored fabric on top and figure out how far it's gonna be laid on top. So I'm taking my yellow t-shirt, laying it out flat, and then using a fabric marker again, I'm figuring out where I'm cutting. For the part where it goes down the center and meets with the pink side as well. The great thing about the fabrics that I chose is that they are a little bit see-through so that you can see the material underneath and where you need to cut. I should have ironed it before I did it, but I didn't really care because it is a Ragdoll costume I didn't care if there were like little imperfections or anything like that. But if I were doing another character that needed this, obviously I would be ironing this beforehand. I'm also cutting out one of the breast cups in this material. I have a very curious cat that always wants to take a peek at what I'm working on. And then you just repeat with the other side of the bodice. The pink material is the most see-through one that I have, so it was super easy to figure out where the yellows ended, so I could cut properly where the pink started. Kind of like how I did with this skirt, I make sure I pin those patches very well. Then I'm taking all my boning material from the previous bodice that I had, making sure to keep them in order of which ones actually went where. And then on the back of the lining, I'm actually drawing how wide they are, how long they are, so that I know where to sew. To keep everything in place, I just made sure I pinned the heck out of each column. And what you're going to do is sew down each side of where the boning is, but only sew one of the openings. I like to sew the bottom ones, and then you're going to insert the boning and then sew off the top so that they stay in place. Very careful when you are sewing off the top, because you don't want your sewing machine to go through the boning, obviously, because you could break your needle. So just make sure you give a little bit of room. It's not going to go anywhere even if your stitches don't connect. As long as you secure the top of it, it'll be fine. And then I took the breast cups of the colored material, pinned them together. For the cups, I'm doing the fabric separate from the lining. I thought it would be easier for inserting the boning if I did it separate. This is where I kind of screwed up in the beginning, because I ended up sewing too close to the edge of the fabric and not actually sewing where my allotted extra material were. So that's why my breast cups ended up being way bigger than they needed to be. Moral of the story, if you're going to give yourself some extra material for sewing, actually use that material for sewing. And then I did the exact same method as I did on the bodice, but on the breast cup for the boning, which is a little bit tricky to sew, so I kind of had to bend the wire a little bit so I could get it sewed up, and then had to bend it back into its shape. And then for the midsection of the bodice, I did a line stitch around the perimeter of the whole thing, just to keep the colored material with the lining. This is my realization that I screwed up with the breast cups.
I need bigger boobies.
I wanted to give it a little test fitting on my mannequin here, so I pinned them all in place, and it was pretty much good. And that is pretty much it for the bodice section of this making of. In the next part, we're going to be finishing off the top and attaching it to the skirt as well. Stay spooky, my friends, and I'll see you in the next one.